press record now whilst I remember. So if you don't want to be on that recording, please keep your video off and your mic off as well, and then you won't appear at all. We're going to be taking questions through chat today, so I'm just going to say hello in there for everyone to see where that is. So there you go, you can see that I'm saying hi. So if you want to share resources in there, please feel welcome to as well. We really encourage that, and we'll take the questions at the end of Colin's talk today. We've just got someone else coming in. Okay, so I'm going to go into the intro then. I think everyone's here at the moment. So just because we've got someone new, this is going to be recorded, so please keep yourself on mute and your video off if you don't want to be included on that recording, and it'll go on to Leeds Libraries YouTube channel. I will share that link in an email afterwards. This is, I think, possibly our last talk of the year. We might have one next week, but it's not been confirmed yet. So I think that's taken us up to about 15 talks, lovely ones from Empowering Women, Women in Leeds Digital, the British Library, even going into the culture sector in Leeds, including talks from Ensemble and how they are all going online and using digital, especially in these times, to reach audiences. So we wanted to put these talks together to stay connected. We were, sorry, I've got a bit of a cold this week. We were still teaching our tech moms, and lockdown happened. So the last 2 weeks, we wanted to make sure that we kept connected. So we started using Zoom, and we thought we would start asking the digital and culture sector to come along each lunchtime and tell us a bit about what they're doing, what they're passionate about, really share ideas and create a really accessible network for everyone. So now these talks are available each week for anyone to join in, no matter what your skill level or interest. And I'm finding them really interesting. So today we have the wonderful Colin Cripps, who is from BJSS, a really interesting topic about tech and the ethics and how we build those into it. So I'm really looking forward to that. So I'm just going to show you a little bit about what we're doing in Leeds Libraries, just in case you will be interested in any of it. There's a few different things. So our libraries are reopening. I do apologise, sorry. And they are available for browsing. Which means that you can go in, find a book and take it home and enjoy it completely for free. We don't charge any fines anymore, so you don't have to worry too much, but we would like them back at some point. So we also have a wonderful app that you can use to reserve books, and a click and collect service so that you can then go and collect them at your local library. And we have 34 libraries across the city. Not all of them are open yet, but you can check which ones are, and it's leeds.gov.uk/libraries for that. In lockdown, because our buildings had to close, there was no computer access, which was a massive thing for a lot of people in Leeds. A lot of us think that adults all have access to to computers, even children, but because we all carry around a mobile phone these days, but a lot of people don't have data or Wi-Fi at home. So this is a really important service to the people of Leeds so that they can get online, look for health services, apply for jobs and upskill and stay connected as well. We have a we have a virtual calendar of activity each week. So this is shared every Monday, and I'll go through a little bit about what that is in a minute. But we also have this, which is the Niche Academy, and it's a fantastic collection of tutorials and support for people who might need a little bit more help. And you can see there's Ancestry Library as well on there. So if you're interested in finding about your family's history, you can have a little look at that. So please do share this with anyone you think would be interested. We also have Ask a Librarian on Twitter and Facebook, which means you can ask us any question you want and we'll try and research it and find the answer to it. It's particularly useful for people who have problems maybe trying to use our ebook service and they want some help on that as well. We can talk them through that. So we've also got ebooks, e-magazines, e-newspapers from across the world, all completely free of charge. So yeah, you can get Gardener's World, all sorts of stuff like that. That's our calendar of events. We have story times every week for your little ones, every day actually, on our Facebook and Twitter, and we choose the best ones that we think you want to see. So I particularly like CBBC's and Tom Hardy, if you want to see that every week. I'm doing social media. Yeah, have a look at that. And we also have our wonderful Code Club. So Code Club is for young people aged 7 to 11. This one's sponsored by City Fibre, it's online. And young people can work alongside librarians and also our volunteers from the digital sector on challenges. This month it is looking at thoughtful comics. And that means that they are creating a story using HTML and CSS using Twine, which is a really cool choose your own adventure type of software kit. After they've done 3 challenges, they're able to apply for a gift voucher of £20 from Pimaroni so that they can buy more devices and up their equipment as well. So it's just a really lovely thing that we're doing there. And we obviously we love books, so we've got a Leeds Reads book club, which is over on Facebook. And this month, because it's Black History Month, we were celebrating Lemni Sisse. I hope I said that right. So please have a little look at that. And if you're a creative soul, this is Clashing with Us every Thursday, but it's 12 till 2. And it's Leeds Drop In and Draw, and it's looking at our beautiful books from the collections in our art library and our local family history library. Lots of things that are usually hidden away. We post them onto Twitter and Facebook, and then we ask you for your responses, and there's a little task each time. So we have some beautiful responses, as you can see there, some lovely drawings. And also, the best kept secret in Leeds is the Secret Library. And this is done by our local family history librarian. So it's got all sorts of cool information about the past. Like it's got some of the most important figures in Leeds, and maps, all sorts of things. So have a little look at that as well. And we're also promoting Black History Month this month as well as Throwback Thursday. And that's everything that we are doing at the moment. So I hope that was interesting. You might find something you're interested in there. I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to hand over to the lovely Colin, who's going to be our talk today. Please remember to put any questions in chat as we go along, and I'll ask them at the end. All right, Colin, take it away. Thank you.
Cool, thank you. So yeah, today I am talking about design and ethics. So I'm just going to share my screen for a few slides I put together. So yes, the topic today is designing technology is designing humanity. So this is trying to emphasize the fact that designers and people that work in technology have a responsibility around the product choices they make. because the choices they make affect the choices that us as users and consumers have every day, both indirectly and directly. So it's quite a big deal that these big companies are making choices that affect our daily lives. So today's talk, I'm going to run through kind of the normal conversation that people talk about, which is obviously the big tech kind of industries, your Facebook, your companies like that. I'm going to talk about a little bit of philosophy because that's my background. I did a graduate degree in philosophy, so that's where my roots are. Then I'm going to bring in some examples showing about the consequences of design, and then a little bit more deeper examples where I look at some other product choices and how that's affected decision making from our perspectives. But first off, who am I? I'm a kickboxing instructor. I'm the one on the right with the gold medal, probably because my eyes are open and my friend's closed his, which is probably why he didn't do quite so well. I'm also a proud owner of Battery Hens. We have Muffin, Squawk, Brownie and Twix. So you can see I've also got a sweet tooth as well as a love of Battery Hens there. And then obviously I am a business analyst as well at BJSS. And a business analyst is somebody that works kind of as a facilitator between business teams and technical teams. So I help kind of gather and define requirements to help build out software and different product solutions for companies that consumers and users can then enjoy. And that can be from anything from a mortgage application to different applications on your phone. So anything like that, it depends what the business is after at the time. But because of that role, I'm obviously very much in a position that the decisions I'm helping to make and helping to define affect the choices that you have as a consumer. So obviously how I help design a mortgage application affects how you can actually fill in your mortgage application and apply for that as well. So that's why this kind of topic of responsibility and design reaches out to me quite a lot. So the normal conversation. Yeah, as I mentioned, this is kind of what a lot of people talk about in general when they think about ethics or ethical technology. And it's important because these are big companies and big technologies that will have a big impact across the world, regardless of whether that's now or in 5 years or in 10 years. You know, AI is coming. There are autonomous vehicles. Teslas are on the road and they're only getting better and better. You know, there's surveillance and there's different privacy constraints that are being put on us, rightly or wrongly, by different companies. And some of those being accelerated and emphasized more because of the COVID restrictions that are in place to help us track the pandemic and things like that. But they're obviously going to affect us quite a lot. So the larger and more profound these effects and these technologies have on us, the more we need to take, or the greater our responsibility is when it comes to making design decisions. So we need to make sure that when we design these products, and any product, that we're being fair, we're being inclusive and generally ethical in our design. And that means thinking about stuff like bias or stereotyping and racism and things like this beyond just designing a good product. We need to think that it's a fair and an inclusive product. But also beyond that, some of the stuff where people have been thinking about these products and bring them out, it's kind of scary where some companies have got things a little bit wrong. So The Social Dilemma is obviously a documentary that's been out on Netflix fairly recently. It's quite sensationalist, but I think it's a good summary of how lots of social media companies are affecting the way we live our lives at the moment. So it's also great that it's bringing that kind of topic and discussion into a wider audience. You know, lots of people don't think about tech and don't think about this stuff because it's not their job. They just use Facebook, they just use Twitter, etc. There's nothing wrong with that in of itself. So it's cool that that discussion and that lens is being put over those technology companies from a platform like Netflix. But moving on, there's kind of some scarier things. You know, we've had the Home Office recently be racist with its algorithms for how it's processing visa applications, because they didn't understand how they were building their algorithms. And that has meant that there was bias implicit within their systems, which, you know, is pretty scary. Then you've got Apple being accused of being sexist, which again is terrifying. This came out of them producing a credit card with Morgan Stanley. I think it's only out in the US at the moment, but when it was released, a lot of high profile people on Twitter came out saying that they were getting much higher credit scores than their wives or their partners because they were men, or that was the only difference. You know, these two couples might have been sharing every bank account, but they were still getting very different credit scores. And Apple didn't actually come out with a statement at all, but Morgan Stanley did, saying that they weren't being sexist. It was because they don't even have gender as a factor within their algorithm decision making, which in of itself shows that they're not completely clued up on how algorithms work, because you can very easily think of proxies for decision making around gender. So it's scary that companies of that size and that clout aren't considering these things fully. Then as well, you've got Google that is making us hate ourselves apparently. And this is around them introducing technology that encourages us to alter our selfies and our pictures to, you know, make our skin different, make our eyes seem brighter or larger or whatever. And it was encouraging you to beautify yourself, really. So it's just a bit scary that companies this large are making things that are quite wrong in lots of ways, and that they're only now being held accountable for those things. So we need to think about this stuff earlier, and we need to think about it fully. But that's the normal conversation. And I want to move on to something, I guess, which is a little bit more fundamental, I suppose, because as I said, all product decisions affect our lives, whether those are these big fancy technologies like AI, or if it's just your tiny decisions on little products that only affect a few hundred users rather than, you know, the millions and millions that are getting affected by Google's phones. But first, there's a little bit of philosophy, as I said. So I'm going to look at today really the philosophy of technology, which is a little subfield that looks at, technology's nature and then its social effects. We're not going to dwell on this part because that's the deep philosophy element, which is already relevant to us now. What constitutes technology? What do we mean when we refer to a technology in of itself, which I don't think is useful to discuss at the moment. But the social effects of those things, I think, is interesting and is very relevant. You know, how is technology affecting us as a society? And what effects is it having at a societal level? With that in mind, I'd like to bring in a topic called mediation theory, which we won't dwell on too much either, but I think considering this lens...
Mini cuppies upstairs.
Sorry? Oh, mediation theory, it's basically an idea that we experience reality through our interactions with it. So everybody's perception of reality is shaped through how they interact with it. And then it extends that to say that technology shapes those interactions. Therefore, therefore technology is shaping our reality. And I think this is quite true if you think about some examples like echo chambers in social media, which for people that aren't familiar with that concept, it's the idea that when you're out there giving your views on Facebook, the things you see are probably ones very related to your own views, which means, you know, if you're always liking things about cats, you're probably going to get shown more pictures of cats because that's how Facebook's algorithm works. It's promoting things that are interesting to you. So it's not going to try and just throw you things about birds when you've never said that you like birds. So this is called the echo, and it reinforces your own views. And so obviously our reality online through Facebook is very much shaped by those things that Facebook is telling us. Slightly different example is, you know, how we've started interacting in meetings and presentations these days since we've all been locked in our homes. You know, right now with Zoom, you're seeing me give a video and a presentation, but that is technology. You're not actually seeing me, you're experiencing me through a technology, i.e. Zoom or FaceTime or whatever you want to use. So I think this theory in of itself has quite a lot of merit. Whether you believe it or not, I'd like you to consider that lens as we go through this today. And I highlight it because, you know, this is how we create technology, and we do interpret reality through these different things. And considering that helps us look at different examples in different ways. So moving on from that, I've got some examples where I'd just like to, I guess, draw out this idea of the responsibility that, you know, product design does affect us quite a lot. And the first one is GDPR. Obviously a super piece of legislation if you're a privacy advocate. Obviously a massive piece of legislation in general that tries to protect our rights and our data. But obviously since it's come in, I get inundated with these cookie banners everywhere, where you're forced to obviously agree or manage your settings quite extensively. And it's super annoying, basically. You know, you just want to quickly read an article or skip onto a website, and you have to do these cookie banners everywhere, and you have to do tons of them if you're flicking between websites. And really, that is fairly meaningless to me. I don't understand what the privacy policy is. I don't know what they're saying. I just hit I agree, and then effectively I've waived my rights under GDPR. Obviously, you still expect the company as abiding to some factors, but it shows that the GDPR's policy in of itself did not think of the consequences of how companies would interpret and implement those things. You know, lots of companies still want to gather data, which they think is useful for targeting their website or targeting adverts or personalizing the content towards you. But it's very much overridden by, just cookie banners, which are compounded by what I would describe as dark UX patterns. So you can see here how I'm nicely encouraged to hit I agree with a nice blue icon. There's no I disagree here, it's manage settings. And I have to go in there, and then I see a list of 300 different services that could collect my data, and I have to individually select which ones I want, which I don't understand. So I just hit back and I hit I agree. You carry on. The next one is Zoom. You know, Zoom, obviously we use this all the time now, which is a great tool, and it's really frictionless, and they encourage their product to be seamless. So you can just get a link and you can click in straight away. Obviously that's had the impact of Zoom bombing, which obviously at the start of lockdown had a massive or a very large impact, much more than it does so now. You know, Zoom has reacted and changed its policies slightly and its implementation tools. But this is a direct impact or a direct example of a design decision. Zoom wanted an approach that encouraged the fewest clicks to make the most seamless service possible, which is probably why it got adopted so much right at the beginning. You know, you did receive a link, you clicked it, you hit join, and you were in a meeting. You didn't have to configure settings, you didn't have to enter a password, any of these standard things that lots of other services had. That approach is great from a user perspective until somebody figures it out and then starts bombing your calls with, you know, random pictures or inappropriate content, things like that, when you're just trying to have a chat with your family. So it was a direct design decision to forego some security constraints to make a more frictionless joining service. So it's just interesting to look at a design decision directly had negative consequences. Next one is YouTube for Kids, which is the spin-off from YouTube. So it basically directs your channels to be more focused on child-appropriate content, really. So you're not just spilling across things which could be explicit or inappropriate for a younger audience. You know, that in of itself sounds a great thing. We don't want our children spilling across that sort of content, which isn't appropriate. But it's interesting that YouTube still uses the same algorithm that is optimized around watch time. So it shows and recommends the next video which has been watched the most, and it keeps going in that cycle so that everybody stays watching as many programs as possible and they stay fixed onto YouTube for Kids. Which, you know, might not be too bad if you're an adult and you're consenting to that sort of approach, or you're more aware that that's happening to you, so you can just exit when you'd like. But it's less obvious to children, and we might not realize when our kids are just watching TV and they're spilling across lots of YouTube for Kids content. You think it's probably okay, Whereas actually a lot of the content on there is more kind of itchy and scratchy from The Simpsons, a little bit more violent or a little bit more crass than you would expect, or less Mickey Mouse and more itchy and scratchy. So some of that content isn't appropriate, and if it's just promoting more and more, it goes down a rabbit hole really. From when you start watching one of those, it gets a little bit worse and things like that. So it can end up showing your children less appropriate content than you think. And also I think it's just interesting that they didn't choose to use an algorithm which perhaps optimized education or a learning path instead. Maybe you could optimize it to show, we just want to show historical based content today, or down this learning path, I want my child to learn more about cats or animals today, or the environment. You can see I've got cats on my mind, I keep bringing them up. But they could have gone down that route to inspire or to educate, but they still tried to optimize view time instead, because obviously that's their business model. They didn't think to change that for children, which I think is a shame, and it's an opportunity missed, hopefully one that they'll rectify, or that we'll become more aware of and take more direct control ourselves on. The next one is around Instagram, and is less a design choice that they have made, and more one that I think would be great if they could make. So this is, if anybody is listening from Instagram, then you can take this from me now. But Instagram, obviously it's a giant photo platform, which means that it has large storage costs, which has an impact on the environment. It takes a lot of energy to store all that information, all that data. Whereas they could use different formats and web formats that would maintain the quality size, as you can see here, whilst doing it at a much smaller data size. So if that done at a scale where there's millions and millions of photos, as there are on Instagram, it would have a massive environmental impact and reduce the carbon footprint that the company's having. And this picture, an example I got here, is from a recent talk I went to from a company called Make Impact, where they focus on making greener designs. So if you're interested in that type of information, I'd check out Make Impact. But yeah, it's just really interesting that you could change the format from whatever format your normal photo is on Instagram to a WebP format, and you'll maintain pretty much the entire quality level, but the data size will be much, much lower. And I think that'd be a really interesting and cool thing for places like Instagram or Facebook or anywhere that has a lot of photos to consider implementing in their tools, because users wouldn't be impacted by that, but the world would be. So I think that would be a nice thing. So I bring up these examples really because people, need to consider what a product's purpose is, and they need to consider what impact it can have. So what impact can it have, and what do we want it to have? We need to be more cognizant of the consequences of our products, and then decide which ones of those consequences we want to encourage and which we want to mitigate, rather than just thinking, here's a product, it looks cool and it's shiny. So there's some quick examples there. I'm going to dive into some deeper ones in a minute, where either some stances have been taken by companies, or I just think they're interesting products where the ethics or the consequences should be thought of a little bit more. First, I've got a little quote for you, which I think is kind of appropriate at that point. The superior man knows what is right. The inferior man understands what will sell. And that again is because it's much easier to design a product that is easy to optimize users and just growth, which is obviously the kind of standard big tech model. Because you can sell things easily, but to sell things that are ethical as well, or that make the right design decisions, is quite hard to do, or much harder to do, I would say, probably. So I just thought that was an appropriate quote that I picked up somewhere talking to people, so I thought I would include it. So the next one, these are on to kind of, what I've described as case studies. And we're looking at design decisions that have either actively been taken or stances that have been put forward that outline an ethical standpoint, really. Descript, I'm not sure how many people would have heard of this, but it claims to be the world's first audio processing tool. And it's a really useful tool if you're in the podcasting business. Basically, it can transcribe audio. So you could give it this recording and it should be able to then just give you a transcript, which you could then put on a blog or on a website or share. You wouldn't have to listen to it and type it out. It's also got lots of cool editing features in there. So it would notice all the times I'm saying or hesitating, and you could just notice them in bulk and delete them. So it's a really quick way of making transcripts from video and audio content. But the company also has a feature that it's recently introduced called overdub, which is basically the reverse of that. They call it generative media, a term that I'd not heard of before, but effectively it allows you to create speech out of a transcript. So you would give it your text, your audio, and it would create audio from that. But the special part is that it would do it using a digital version of your voice. So you would spend a little bit of time training it, speaking to it, answering some random questions, and then it would help that audio sound like you already. So you wouldn't have to record anything yourself. You've just trained a media, you've given it some typed script, and then it would say it and sound like you. And the versions of this I've listened to, they're pretty accurate. They're not obviously there yet. You can tell it's an automated voice, but it's only a matter of time before that gets better. And then you wouldn't have to record podcasts anymore. You could just type them out and send them. It would be a cool thing to have out there. But it also has, potential negative effects. Can you imagine getting somebody influential's voice like Boris Johnson's and just sending some text into it and then having an audio recording of him saying that? You could easily create a deep fake of a BBC interview going on where one of the known interviewers' voices is being used to interview Boris Johnson. He's replying, saying things, and that could all be created through this, through these digital voices. So there's scary potential from overdub, this feature from Descript. But the thing I liked, and the reason I included this, is because of their stance on it. So they've come out and released an ethical kind of policy, really. So what they say is that this technology does exist, and it exists, and it will keep getting better. So they think it's better to get out in front of it and implement controls so that it's so much easier to create a digital voice using their technology than another kind of pirated version, perhaps, and put controls in there so that you can prevent those sorts of things happening. And their quote here says that you will own your digital voice, so they wouldn't be able to control it themselves. They wouldn't be able to use the digital voice that you created on their platform, which I think is a nice stance. They've also said you have the sole authority to decide when and how it is used, again, giving you ownership of it, which means that your team can decide to use your voice, which would obviously lead down a rabbit hole of other people choosing to use your voice without you even being aware that your voice is being used to saying things and that being put out to the public. So whether you believe those are strong enough controls or not, I think it's just very interesting that a company has got out ahead of itself, realized that there are potential ethical ramifications to their technology, and made a whole ethical policy, put it on their website, and taken a stance on it, rather than just waiting to react to negative headlines. They got out ahead of it. And I think that's a great way to approach design and design decisions, because we shouldn't be anti-technology, we should be pro it. We just need to make sure it's working for us and doesn't have negative consequences and connotations. So a fancy new technology there, Descript. If anybody makes podcasts, I'd recommend checking it out. The next one, our favorite Alexas and Cortanas. So our virtual assistants powered by AI technology. This obviously comes coupled normally with privacy concerns. Is Alexa listening to me all the time? Is that then sending that information to Amazon? And is it just bulk data gathering? And regardless of the things they say about whether it is or whether it isn't, nobody fully trusts them and probably thinks that that is true. But that's not why I included this today. I think that is one thought in of itself. But I think what's interesting is that most of these AI assistants decided to use a female voice rather than a male voice. And And is that just because they didn't think about it, which, you know, isn't great in of itself, or are they thinking that a virtual assistant should be a female voice because they're feeding into and perpetuating that kind of female stereotype of, you know, an obedient secretary that does your bidding and answers your questions? This is scary because the amount of studies that show that people aren't particularly polite to their virtual assistants. I recently heard one, I can't remember the source, so don't quote me on this, but it was something like 60% of people said they are regularly rude to their virtual assistants. So obviously, if that is perpetrating the idea that of a female secretary and 60% of people are being rude to that secretary, it doesn't have great, it doesn't bode well, really, and it encourages the wrong idea. Some companies have taken a stance on this now. So Alexa, or Amazon, sorry, has always said that Alexa is genderless. It's not meant to be a female, regardless of whether it sounds female or not. I disagree with that it is genderless. It sounds very female to me when you listen to Alexa. Apple has released Siri as default to sound like a man now. So whenever you use Siri on a new iPhone, it will be defaulted to a male voice, which I think is a good step forward on it. But that, again, was reactive rather than proactive. The more interesting one is Microsoft. When asked about it, they said a female voice best supports their goals of creating a digital assistant. They haven't said why. They don't know why a female voice was better or how that met their goals over a different voice, but it's very poignant to see that they've specifically chosen a female voice because I think it better suits a digital assistant. It's interesting to think about, especially as it's not necessary. You could have had a male voice, or you could also have a genderless voice, which is something when I was doing some research for this, I stumbled across. And this was a campaign put together by Pride in Copenhagen, where some digital agencies and the Pride organization there decided to create a genderless voice. So they did lots of studies and research into what constitutes or makes a female voice sound female, or what makes a male voice sound female. So they looked at things, you know, pitch and intonation and things like this, and tried to beeline on the characteristics that encourage that thought in our head. And then they made a voice that sounds genderless. You can listen to it on genderlessvoice.com, and it is really convincing. It's very hard to place down whether that's male or female. So the resources with, you know, Amazon or Microsoft or Apple, they could easily have produced something like this that would have at least shown that they were trying, even if that genderless voice isn't convincing to you as genderless, or you can easily place it as a man or a woman, or a male or a female voice. It would have taken a stance on it and shown that actually we think this is a digital assistant, it doesn't need to be gendered. We've attempted to create a genderless voice. So I'd really encourage you to go check that out. They've got a cool promotional trailer that shows how it was made and designed. It's about a 2-minute video, so it doesn't take too long, but I think it's interesting to listen to that voice, and I hope that it gets picked up and used more in digital products to encourage a less gendered approach to digital technology, which we don't need to prescribe a gender to. They're digital technologies, they're robots, unless there's a specific reason that something needs to be male or female. Why do we need to prescribe that to it? And the last case study I've got is a piece of software called Hotjar, which, if there's any user researchers among you, or UX designers, or anybody really that builds a lot of software and wants to get feedback on that, they've probably heard of the software called Hotjar. And it claims to understand how users are really experiencing your site. That's their tagline. And it's a really cool piece of software. So it has things like heat maps. So you can see exactly where somebody has clicked on your website, which allows you to optimize your site. So you could see that everybody keeps clicking on your home button rather than the back button after they've done things. And you can see the journey that somebody's taken to try and optimize it and make it more frictionless and provide a better service and a better website or product or app to your users. And I think that's really good. They also have things like surveys that pop up right at the optimized time. So it might be after 3 scrolls of your mouse, a survey pops up asking you a question of, did you manage to find what you're after today? yes, no, was just browsing or something, and you can specify those things to the nth detail, which allows you to get just the right amount of feedback just at the right times. So it's really, really useful like that. And they also have a feature called session recording, which enables you to see how your user is dragging their mouse all over the place. You can see that they're making inconsistent movements, or perhaps they hesitated for a long time on a place. When they were filling in a form, everybody had to click the tooltip or the little show me more information, which is probably implying that your form isn't clear. That sort of information needs refining so that you could provide a better service to your users. The interesting thing, and the reason I've included it today, is by default, session recording records everything that happens on that screen. So obviously, if you're filling in a form that includes your email address or your credit card number, it will record that information and anybody can look at that. Obviously, you hope that the individuals at the company aren't worried about your email address. They don't want your credit card number. They don't care about the secret password or the secret name of your banking details, those sorts of things. You'd hope that they're not looking at that information, but the point is, by default, the session recording is picking up that information when it doesn't have to, because they offer the feature to blur out that information or to swap every piece of text to a cross or a star or something meaningless. So as soon as somebody clicks in a form and stops typing in colin@email.com, it would just say xxx@xxx.com instead. So you wouldn't be able to get anything meaningful from that. But it's a shame that they chose that to be an opt-in service rather than an opt-out, because there may be specific reasons that you need to look at the information that somebody has typed in. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but it could be possible that you need to know what information somebody's writing in a form to help you make that better, or what people are typing in to see if everybody keeps making the same mistakes. So there is a valid reason to have that kind of feature there, but I think it should be the default that you don't gather that information. You don't gather personal information that isn't really helping your user research. And if you have a specific need, then you can go into the settings and you can set it up. You take the burden on, rather than shifting that the other way, so that anybody now looking at the research from me filling in a sale purchase on Amazon or a buyer's site, that they've now got all the information about my email or my password or my name or my address, all this kind of very personal information they don't need and doesn't help them. So I thought that was interesting as well. And that's my final example today, but I hope that kind of showing you some products from a different lens like this and the design consequences indirectly or directly that the design choices these people have made has had on both us as users and consumers of products kind of makes you consider these items a little bit differently. And I've got one quote to leave you with, which is that any technology will help to shape human actions and experiences, will therefore have an impact that can be understood in ethical terms, and that designers materialize morality. So if designers are making decisions that are immoral, that will shape our morality differently, and it will create a different ethical impact throughout our society. And going back to that mediation theory, if technology is shaping our reality, and we're shaping immoral technology, we'll have an immoral society. So it's important that we consider ethics and the impact of our design decisions. So that's everything from me today. Thank you. And if there's any questions, happy to field in any way that you want.
Oh, thank you, Colin. That was really interesting. I've just asked everyone to put any questions in the chat. So if you want to do so, please do that. That'd be fantastic. And I will read them out to Colin. Yeah, really interesting stuff, really. I think it's strange, isn't it? Because there's a few kind of tools there that I'd quite like to use now, but you do have to think about the ethics behind it, don't you? And what you're seeing. And I haven't watched The Social Dilemma yet, but a lot of my friends have, and they were quite shocked. They're like, there's people on computers and they're just trying to keep us on as long as possible. Yeah, they are. So I think a lot of people don't really think about that. So yeah, really
Yeah,
good.
that's why I thought the social dilemma was so interesting from that perspective, that the more people are aware of that kind of business model, that you are the product in services, that the more they'll start to take action on it. And it won't be that hard for places like Facebook to think of another good business model and still make lots of money that will be an ethical or a more moral way of providing connections, if that's their actual goal. And, you know, the proof is in the actions.
I think with Facebook, it owns quite a lot of things now, doesn't it? So it's Instagram, WhatsApp, and what else? Oh, Oculus VR headsets. So now if you want to use them, you have to have a Facebook account. So I think so that causes problems, because we do VR sessions with people in old people's homes and trying to so we've got a question here. Can you be ethical and still make something that people want to use?
Yeah, I absolutely think you can. I don't think there's any reason that you can build something that people don't. I don't see why it has to be unethical for you to want to use a service like that Hotjar one. That's a fine service. All they need to do is to make it more ethical. Is to swap around whether they're recording the information by default or not. You know, it's a very easy change for them to make it a much more ethical product. They wouldn't then record all my information by default. And if you had a specific reason for it, you can go in, fiddle around and make the more burdensome changes that are required because you have a direct user research need for it.
I think Fiona's saying, do you have any examples? Have you got any more examples of really ethical kind of products?
So I think as well, lots of general products are quite ethical, but it's more about choosing to think about the consequences that you want to mitigate or encourage. You know, I would encourage any design team to use an exercise called consequence scanning, which is a really simple one. You just ask 3 questions, you know, what are the consequences? Which do we want to mitigate? Which do we want to encourage? And then if you've asked those 3 questions and you're still not choosing to mitigate the ones that are damaging to users, then it's not a great product. And quite an ethical one to think about from, if you're into privacy, like me, is DuckDuckGo, which compared to Google, offers the same service. It's a search engine, but it prides itself on not gathering personal information and instead feeding ads that are personalized based on context rather than your individual information. So instead of, because you previously typed about cats, they're going to show you cat adverts. They might, if you're typing in about cats, they'll show you a cat advert. So it's a much more relevant advert, not based on your information. And that stance is a very ethical approach. I don't know how the rest of the company runs, so I'm not sure if it's ethical to the bone or not, but I think that stance is a good way to do things.
I love how obsessed with cats you are. Have you got a new cat?
No, it's because I'm so used to sat in my office room thing that I've set up here, and there's a cat across the road that is like chasing squirrels that keep burying nuts in the grass there. So I'm like constantly watching it every day to see if it catches any. Yeah,
I love it. You should do more products with cats. We use DuckGo. What is it? DuckGo or something. It's like default on Raspberry Pis, which we use on our code clubs.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, it's really, it seems good. And I would also recommend people to have a little look at Mozilla Festival, because I went for the first time, was it at the start of the year or the end of last year? Time has gone a bit loopy this year, so who knows. But it's very much, it was very much about us becoming like, creating our own digital and not being pushed to one company that we use like Google and that kind of thing, because there are alternatives for a lot of things, and yeah, that kind of thing. I don't know what I'm saying there. I've lost it.
Mozilla's another good example though. It is a company that encourages much more privacy and much more care of your information rather than just trying to monetize it.
Yes, exactly.
Upfront about its stance, which I think is an important act. If a company just says, by the way, we collect your data to sell it, that's how we make money, then at least you're aware of what's going on, rather than trying to cover it up with a stance of we don't do this or we make money through this way. If you want to see how to also make money, read this 200-page document, which no one does.
They could be doing anything. Thank you. I think just some wonderful comments just saying how inspiring it was and thought-provoking. So thank you so much, Colin. I think we'll end there. I hope you have, yeah, thank you so much for coming along, everyone, on your lunch break and enjoying this tech talk with us. Massive thank you for Colin for giving up his time and expertise today. It was really interesting and thought-provoking, like you said. So if you go to YouTube and search for Leeds Libraries, you'll find a Tech Talk playlist, and this will be going on there by the end of the week.